Welcome. I'm Mike Nye.
And I'm Tarran Merlo from the Hail and Well Met podcasts.
And I'm Alex Telander from the Ostium Network. And welcome to our Tea-Cast. While there is tea, there is hope. Welcome to our first episode of While There Is Tea, There Is Hope. If you found us, it probably means you like tea in some way, or you know us hosts perhaps and want to hear our voices or something. With me, I've got Tarran Merlo. Say hi.
Hello.
And he'll talk lots more later. I just want to talk a little bit about why I wanted to start this podcast, in addition to the many other podcasts that I do. I love tea. I've loved tea for a long time. If you've listened to Ostium, you should be able to pick that up. Monica's tea obsession comes straight from me. And with everything going on right now with the pandemic and with our social upheaval, the pandemic's a bad thing, the social upheaval is a good thing. I wanted to try and do something positive and uplifting for me, for my friends who are co-hosting with us on there, and also for listeners to kind of give something positive and uplifting. And I thought tea is something I care dearly about, and I thought it would be something new and interesting to try and educate me more on tea and the history of tea, and also the listeners and co-hosts. I actually got hold of a book that goes into the whole history of tea called A Thirst for Empire, How Tea Shaped the Modern World by Erika Rappaport, published in 2017 from Princeton University Press. And I'm going to be quoting quite a bit from that, just because it's got some really good history, and I feel some really good point of view and perspective on tea, which, as it's mainly or greatly drunk by the Western world, it comes from and is created by people of color. So it feels like a good time to be kind of addressing this in a podcast where I talk about something I like, but also going into how privileged we are by being able to have an endless supply of tea at the click of a button.
Absolutely.
I wanted to start out with a few facts and quotes I took from the book about tea. Admiral Lord Mountavans, the regional commissioner for civil defense in London during the war, said, "It gave us courage and that matey feeling which gets the best effort out of us to help our fellow humans." An advertising slogan said, "Tea revives you." There were posters that were put around proclaiming, "There is health in good tea." The Chinese understood that tea had restorative properties. Centuries before, the German scientist Friedrich Rung discovered caffeine in 1819. Many believed that it could cure headaches, constipation, and various other serious disorders. I'm about 60, 70 pages into the book now and hearing more and more how teas are supposed to fix all these different things just with a single cup.
When I was looking back through some of the advertising slogans and one that you mentioned of tea revives you, a lot of advertising going on with tea and specifically around rationing and those sorts of things during the Great Depression and through the World Wars. And a lot of that was around the same time that cigarette use was also advertised in a very, very similar vein for its health benefits and its amazing positive impacts on your life. And it was a really interesting sort of juxtaposition going back through some of those old ads going, hang on, one of those is clearly wrong while the other one is pretty much right.
Right. And still very popular.
It is.
Special way. All right. So let's, Tarran, if you can give a bit of intro who you are and your earliest memory of drinking tea.
Yeah. So yeah, as you've said, Alex, thank you for having me on board today. I'm Tarran from Hail and Well Met. We do a few podcasts ourselves and done a few collaborations with yourself, Alex, through Ostium. Worked on the Cersei podcast with you as well, and had some deep interest into manifestations as well. So it's been great to be a part of those and be involved in them as well. So I'm sort of honoured to be recording with you today. As you said, clearly tea has been a pretty critical component of all things Ostium for a while. But as you've said as well, it's been a pretty key component of worldwide cultures for as long as we've been around. For me personally, my first memory of tea, or maybe the most critical one, the one that stands out the most as one of the early ones I had, was with my nana, my mum's mum. She used to take care of my brother and myself over the school holidays. Mum and dad both worked. And my nan used to make a cup of tea. And I remember asking her what on earth you're doing, because for me, I'd made cup of teas for mum and dad before. You put a tea bag in a mug, put some water in it, stick it in the microwave for a minute and a half, and you're done. That's a cup of tea. But Nana went. She boiled the kettle. Took 5 minutes to boil this pot of water. Takes out this ceramic teapot, puts a strainer on the top, puts these weird leaves in the top of that, pours this boiling water over it, and then this thing sits there for a good 10 minutes before she pours out a cup on this porcelain teacup on a saucer, a little bit of milk, a little bit of sugar, and it was this 15 to 20 minute process, this whole elaborate ritual to go through.
Did she have a tea cozy too?
She didn't. Living in Western Australia, I think things don't tend to get cold very quickly. Mainly the opposite, unfortunately. And she made me one, and that was probably my first properly made cup of tea. I've kind of enjoyed them ever since. That was a sort of fairly plain English breakfast, as close to generic tea as you can probably get in the market.
Now, milk and or sugar, question mark?
Look, for my nan, it was a definite must. For me, for a long time, it was both. And I'm ashamed to admit that it was milk and a number of teaspoons of sugar. But much more like
but it sounds like she made it pretty strong, so getting started. Yeah.
I think that lasted her a good 3 or 4 cups with a little bit of myself. So, But no, for me, over time, I've definitely gone off the sugar altogether. Sort of both tea and coffees. Not that that's a bit of a dirty word in this podcast, I think, but
oh no, we can talk about it. That's in part of the history too, because coffee and tea were being shipped over from colonies and everything. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it'll come.
But no, definitely no sugar. And the milk really depends on what the tea is, and my mood. But no, most of the time it's milkless. It sort of has a better flavor to it in a lot of instances.
I think for me, it was, again, a kind of similar thing where my mum was always drinking tea. My dad, he'll drink tea, but not so much occasionally. He's more of a coffee person. But I think probably just seeing my mum drink tea so much made me want to try it. And I don't really remember exactly when, but just all of a sudden it was, I'm a tea drinker and drinking it every night. And I can remember one really weird, old, distant memory from, I'm trying to think, I must have been maybe 10 or younger. And it was, let me think, not my nana, but her sister, so my Aunt Ada. And it was between her and my cousin at, I can't remember, I think it was the cousin's house. So the cousin was about 4 years older than me or something like that. And just, they were all sitting at the table. I wasn't there. I was with the younger kids. And they're all sitting there drinking tea. And they got their tea confused. And they're like holding the cups. And they're like, oh, is this your tea? I don't know. This is your tea, maybe. We've got it mixed up. And that's all I really remember, just how like refined and polite it all seemed with them drinking tea all together there and everything. So that's
almost like a comedy routine.
But they're all just so like, being British, so proper and polite about it. And, me looking from the outside, I was like, interesting. So, as you mentioned earlier, you were drinking tea. So what are you drinking right now? Right
now, I am sampling I'm drinking the Twinings Early Grey.
Cheers. Same thing.
Oh, look at that. There you go. I have to say, my cup is probably a little bit less fancy than yours. I've got, well, no, actually saying this, that's a cup I got from my wife for my birthday. I want to be a nice person, but everyone is so stupid. I need to get a podcast themed one, I think.
My wife got one, and it's like the perfect size for tea, a good large amount, but not too much and not too little. And so we got managed to get a second one. So she's Libra, but so we use them a lot. So we got two because I'm always drinking from them too. But yes,
so
Twinings
I am
Early
cheating
Grey.
a little bit. So I've got my cup, but then I've got my pot. So I've got my top up for when I empty the smaller
when you
cup.
need to, depending how long we go on. But yeah, Twinings Early Grey, loosely, we're on the same page there. I just did the last little bit of it I had, but that's because I have more tea coming later this week, so I think I'll be okay.
You're not in short supply then. But
Not of the Twinings Early Grey, which has lasted me since, when was that? Christmas, I think. A whole little.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think that the Earl Grey obsession, and I'll call it an obsession because that's kind of been my staple for a long time, is directly. I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm a massive Star Trek fan, and as such, you can't go past a cup of Picard's favourite. Although in saying that, I don't really like my tea Earl Grey hot. For me, sort of Earl Grey should be on that verge of being almost too hot to drink, but cool enough that if you're about to rush out for a meeting or something, you can down the whole cup if you have to in a hurry. But even making this cup here, as soon as the hot water hit it, just that smell of the bergamot came through, and it sort of was, that's why I like this.
And you really wanted to steep for 5 minutes. Yeah, my wife started having this one too and had it too much and got sick of it. So she likes other different kinds of Earl Greys, but the Twinings one has always been my go-to. Again, I think because, I think my mum doesn't like that one as much, but my dad does, and it's just kind of a go-to we always had at the house. So I was bred on it. So
I was always. Yeah. I actually realised I never knew what a bergamot was. So it's this oil, and I always assumed it was some sort of fragrant plant, like a lavender or a rosemary or something there. But and again, I'm not ashamed to admit that it took you saying, "Hey, do you want to come on this episode and have a look?" And I went, "What is bergamot oil?" And for those in my situation who have no idea, it's a citrus plant. It's an Italian citrus plant, sort of similar to a lime, and apparently originated as a hybrid blend of lemon and an Italian bitter orange. Which, and I've got a little bit of an interesting history of the Earl Grey if you want to hear it.
Yeah, sure. We can go off script. This is all new from episode
Sorry.
1, so why not?
So Earl Grey is, I guess, unsurprisingly named after Earl Grey. His full name was Charles Grey, the second Earl of Grey, who was the British Prime Minister in the 1830s. And apparently he received this tea blend as a gift. There's a couple of legends about it, though. There's 3 different backstories that people have believe it's come from.
Probably all apocryphal, but
the first one definitely is. And there's some proof to sort of back up the fact that it is absolutely an apocryphal legend. But it says that a Chinese mandarin, so a bureaucrat, had a son who was saved from drowning by one of Lord Grey's men. But the problem with that one is he was saved in China, as the legend goes. But the problem there is Lord Grey and his entourage and his men never once went to China. So it's sort of this thing of, he saved a bureaucrat's son while he was in China that he never went to. So we kind of throw that one out the window and think, no, it's not really right. Jackson's of Piccadilly, which was a London tea house and is now owned by Twinings, claims that they invented this sort of tea bergamot blend. Again, though, that's sort of doubted because while they own the patent and the right to call it an Earl Grey, it seems to have been a few years, sort of 5, 6, 7 years after what I think is the true origin story and the one that I'm probably the fan of. It's the one that's purported by the Grey family. So you got to have some truth to it. And they say that the tea was a specific blend by, again, a Chinese bureaucrat, a Chinese mandarin, for Lord Grey, directly to offset the water at Lord Grey's Howick Hall, so his main residence. That hall, the water table in the area and the land in the area had a huge amount of lime, high ratio of lime. So that not the fruit, the mineral.
Rock, yeah.
Yeah, in all the surrounding soil. So he made this blend by adding bergamot to offset the taste and the texture of this lime in the tea, in the water, to make this tea. And you had Lady Grey, who entertained at the hall quite frequently.
Which is another blend of tea, Lady Grey.
Correct. And sorry, my faux pas there. Twinings don't hold the rights to Earl Grey; they hold the rights to Lady Grey.
Oh, okay.
Because Earl Grey is a generic name, whereas Lady Grey is the one that they hold the rights to. Yeah. So they hold that trademark and release that, which is Lady Grey being the same sort of tea, bergamot and lemon as well, and that's how they get away with calling it a Lady Grey.
Lady Grey,
and owning the trademark to it. But so it's sort of that one sounded the most plausible to me. Yeah, an English lord complaining about the water quality, and one of his people that were there saying, "Well, hey, I've got a fix for that. You know this tea stuff that you like. If I add a bit of this, there we go. Here's a great tasting tea that you just ignore the lime." Now
I wonder what it was like when they had it with actual decent tasting water, what it must have been like. With the oh, this is so much better with real water.
Let's drink this every day.
I wonder what the actual, well, I guess you could try and reproduce it at home to see if it makes a different taste by adding,
add some lime in the water. I wonder how poisonous
sprinkle. Or put it in the strainer or something.
Much like everything else in the 1800s was probably poisonous for you. We'll do some mercury-based makeup and some lead-based and wonder why we all die at 25. So
speaking of the 1830s, let's go way back for the little history bit. I've been looking through Pete's. Do they have Pete's in Australia?
No, but online.
So it's an American chain. I think they originally started pretty near here in San Francisco and Berkeley, but I think someone bought them out. But anyway, they have a cool little big history section. I thought I'd reproduce here for us, going way, way back. So this first part is the legends from China and India. Tea's origin story is infused with a blend of myth and fact and colored by ancient concepts of spirituality and philosophy. According to Chinese legend, the history of tea began in 2737 BCE, when the Emperor Shen Nong, a skilled ruler and scientist, accidentally discovered tea while boiling water in the garden. A leaf from an overhanging wild tree drifted into his pot. The emperor enjoyed drinking the infused water so much that he was compelled to research the plant further. Legend has it that the emperor discovered tea's medicinal properties during his research. Indian history attributes the discovery of tea to Prince Bodhidharma, an Indian saint who founded the Zen school of Buddhism. In the year 520, he left India to preach Buddhism in China. To prove some Zen principles, he vowed to meditate for 9 years without sleep. It is said that towards the end of his meditation, he fell asleep. Upon awaking, he was so distraught that he cut off his eyelids and threw them to the ground. Legend has it that a tea plant sprung up on the spot to sanctify his sacrifice. Thoughts?
I have to say I've been, again, woefully ignorant of my tea history until, again, we started talking about putting something together here, and my research has been a bit of an eye opener. I'm a history major by education, much is the curse of my life, which means I tend to get caught up in the nitty gritty when I get into a rabbit hole, which is why I tend to avoid going deep into things, because I tend to not be able to find my way out pretty easily.
And
so
there's centuries of history on this, so
it really
if not millennia.
it's terrifying to sort of see where it comes in. And
this is partly kind of why I wanted to do this, because I've always kind of wanted to know the immense history, and knowing it was going to be a huge, big door opening for me and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to get into it. I even had ideas of one day writing a book about the history of tea or something, but doing a podcast.
There's enough content to write a few volumes, I think, at least. But, and I think part of the challenge with not so much the early history, but going through, I'll call it the mid section of the history of tea, sort of the AD period sort of onwards, is needing to understand a lot more than just the tea story out of it. There's definitely a lot more socioeconomic and political background and crossover of cultures that has such a impact on the way everything is working, and so much interconnection with everything else that's going on in the world, from wars to personal grief that people have with certain key characters have. So it's hard to sort of take this out of that context and talk about it in isolation. But
it's also not, I don't feel it's right too, as a couple of white guys, a bunch of white guys, as we have when we have Mike on too, just doing it that way naively and not acknowledging the sacrifice that's been made.
It's been massive, unfortunately. From the minimal that I've started digging into this, it's been a massive impact. But I guess those two legends that you've read through there, I'd have to probably align more to the Chinese side of things, purely from a timing perspective. Although in saying that, the first, I guess, primary resource, primary piece of historical fact that I could find, at least, was more anecdotal. So it's hard even to call it a primary source, but sort of the anecdotal evidence of its use for medicinal properties during the Shang Dynasty, which is sort of that 1766 to 1050 BCE. So 1,000 years past that, the legend piece. So
right.
Look, is that legend accurate? Look, highly likely. It's it's highly likely that these sort of things happened by accident, accidentally, pouring some boiling water over a leaf and realizing that it's a pretty tasty drink.
Leaving it there for a while and having it turn into something.
But then
with other things, with when you're cooking or just different things you're blending together, and just how people discover them in similar ways.
Which is amazing. It is amazing to sort of look back at the history of some foods or foods and drinks and realize that that was a complete accident.
But also with them obviously drinking it over and over, it obviously did make them feel better in certain ways. That there was some part of it that was healing and helping.
I think it was that sort of 1,000 years later or thereabouts that you started to see it. It's more frequent use for its medicinal properties, the deliberate mixing of that with other barks and seeds and leaves in a bit of a trial and error manner to sort of see what was the most potent remedy for a given ailment. It might be you've got a headache. Oh, well, this tea mixed with this type of bark or this type of leaf, release that better than
or anything like that.
Yeah, all of that, because we talk about it as if, yes, we've got this history there, and we don't. Unfortunately, history from
that long ago,
we're talking 5,000 years ago, is hard. There's not a lot of direct historical texts that survive through there, and those that do are often hard to translate. Those dialogues and ways of speech and writing have mutated and changed to an extent that it's almost impossible to get it 100% correct. So it's interpretations of interpretations. So they tend to have gained this, especially in looking at tea specifically and its history there. It's gained that inherent mystic quality of healing arts and the tie-in and all of the religious interconnections of that don't help the mystic element of that. They kind of build on that again. Which was, I didn't realize that it was something that was so old. To be completely honest. Yes, it was a bit of an eye-opener for me. One of the interesting things that did come out when I was looking through that history there was around the turn of the BCE to AD sort of eras, was the popular view as tea as a key component in Chinese medicine. So coming out of that mystic element and moving more into a deliberate medical use there was partly by a gentleman by the name of, and excuse my pronunciation, but Hua Tao, who was a Chinese physician who believed to have been living 140 to 280 AD during the Eastern Han Dynasty, and still very much honoured today as one of the leading medical practitioners of his time. I believe there's even a statue of him, one of the Chinese hospitals. There's a statue erected of him. And while a lot of his famous elements came around from his use of tea in medical practices, he is a little bit more commonly known with associated with the boiling of a certain other plant into a powder for anesthetic use. He boiled and crushed up cannabis powder and used it as an anesthetic during surgery. But he used that in conjunction with tea to alleviate symptoms and provide relief for his patients, which I thought, that's much like a lot of previous drinks, even more modern ones. Mix them up with a little bit of what we now know, or what we now deem to be in some areas illicit drugs, and they tend to help quite well. So,
or thinking of Coca-Cola or something like that too, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I did see a great meme the other day of given the current climate, Coke has decided to reintroduce cocaine into their drink to help everyone get through.
So now I'm going to quote a little bit from A Thirst for Empire, a little bit about how tea works. Tea can grow in many climates, but thrives in tropical and subtropical areas with warm temperatures, high humidity, and a great deal of water, sunlight, and well-drained and nitrogen-rich soil. Once mature, the freshly picked leaves must be processed quickly to prevent spoilage. Tea can be made into bricks, pounded into powder, and dried and fermented in various ways to become green, black, oolong, and other varieties. It can be served hot, iced, with added flavorings and spices, prepared in urns, samovars, and pots, sold in tea bags, and even freeze-dried, that has no appreciable industrial uses like corn, soil, sugar, oils, cotton, or even diamonds. Tea is basically a beverage. Yes, you drink it to possibly help some things, but you drink it also because you like the taste of it and enjoy it, and it doesn't work for anything else really other than enjoying it.
That's exactly right. It has no other use. That's amazing. I'd never really considered it like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you were to bathe in a bath of tea, I don't know if that might do anything to the skin or whatever, but
Quite possibly.
it might not be good. But
No. I mean, so when you say tea here, we're specifically dealing and talking about the, what was it? Hang on, there we go. The Camellia sinensis plant, the leaves of the Camellia sinensis plant, which when I guess Western culture traditionally tends to think of that as black tea. Obviously, as you said, a few different varieties through that, and it's all based on the way it's prepared. You have your white, yellows, green, oolong, black, and sort of fermented or post-fermented sort of dark tea. But something that I've come up to or sort of realized in the last probably 6 months of my tea drinking life has been the use of the word tea for, and I'll say in this context, herbal teas, is completely and utterly wrong. And this is probably going to be a little bit tea snobby kind of thing of me. So
I think it comes with the territory here, so it's expected.
It does, yeah. So all of those, anything that doesn't have the leaf of the Camellia sinensis in it, shouldn't be called a tea. It should be a tisane, which is a non-Camellia sinensis based tea for all intents and purposes.
Bizarre tea.
And that's been probably a fair percentage of my drinking has been herbals or tisanes over the last 6 months. I do enjoy my Earl Grey and we'll occasionally have a blended sort of mix, a chai or something similar to that, where you have your Camellia sinensis tea with a mix of herbs and spices, but it still has the tea leaf in it. As
the root.
that sort of base to it. No, root works well. But yeah, a lot of my tea has been, or a lot of my tisane drinking has been tisanes, not teas, which I found was quite interesting. And again, I've been letting the tea team down by drinking non-tea teas.
But you're also drinking it because you're enjoying it, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was the other day.
One of the books that I've been reading has been, and I actually managed to read this online as a scanned-in text, which I thought was just an amazing sign of the times that we live in, that I can go and grab a book without having to leave the house and read it. I had to borrow it hour on hour, which was fine, but that's okay. It was free to borrow continually, so I just kept doing it. But it was from Mary Lou Heiss, The Story of Tea, which was The Story of Tea, A Cultural History and Drinking Guide. The drinking guide's got some really interesting pieces in it, but one of the quotes from there is a sentence of, "Tea has a long and turbulent history, filled with intrigue, adventure, fortune gained and lost, embargoes, drugs, taxation, smugglers, war, revolution, religious asceticism, artistic expression, and social change." And I thought, everything about that sentence kind of sums up the terrifying nature of what tea has really been, across history, unfortunately. But no, that's an interesting text. I think yours is probably going to promise to be a little bit more true to fact. I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, all those things you all mentioned, I've hit a lot of them already. Even though I'm currently working through I think mid to late 19th century.
Okay.
All the smuggling and all the different levels, the taxes, and all these different things, and even down to again, I haven't gotten too much into it, but how England turned against Chinese tea, wanting to make their own in India and kind of making their own thing, which was apparently terrible at first and took 30 odd years to actually make to anything decent. And the book has got, it's been a lot of history is covered, but I think also a lot of good perspective in pointing out how colonialism and everything turned against different groups and peoples and things like that, all with the game of getting more tea and getting richer off of it, which
and that seems
still
to be
applies today.
Yeah, it does.
And
seems to be the common theme throughout most of history is where can we make money off this? Where can I have power and control? And it's a sad truth, a sad reality of the history we have is fundamentally fueled by that greed
and the suffering of others, and most often, if not always, non-white people. I wanted to mention a few quotes here from kind of two different perspectives. One's an American merchant in the mid-19th century talking about tea. It was kind of interesting to learn how much tea was in the early Americas and how it became such a big thing.
Yes.
And then really with the Boston Tea Party and then the Revolution and all that kind of changed it a bit. But he said, no other production of the soil has in equal degree stimulated the intercourse of the most distant portions of the globe. Nor has any other beverage with equally alloyed behavior so commended itself to the palates for the people of the more civilized nations, or become so much a source of comfort, and a means of temperance, healthfulness, and cheerfulness, whilst it may be doubted if any other is equally restorative and stimulative of the intellectual faculties of man. Yeah, there's a lot in that. I feel kind of encapsulates what we started to talk a lot about here, where tea, spread around the globe and primarily went to the big colonies. I remember reading that Britain was actually a little later to get to it, and you had Portugal first and the Netherlands getting tea, and again, taking it primarily from non-white people to them, feeling that they almost deserved to have it, It was theirs by right sort of thing and had to come to them. And no matter how many of those suffered along the way to get it to them, that was the important thing, and to make money off of it.
It was seen as I almost attribute it in a similar way to the gold standard from a currency point of view. Tea sort of became a social, a cultural currency. Yeah, we have more than you, therefore we're better than you. We're more important than you. We're more capable, whatever the case may be. And where Britain comes into play, and partly a little bit tongue in cheek, they definitely were a little bit later to the game as such. But it was almost interesting to see that as soon as the French had tea, the English went, no, we must have this as well, and we must have more of it, and we must control this. Sort of, and they also did empire builders,
beginning with to make it a universal thing to all the classes, especially the working class and women at home and all this stuff. But then, as that became prevalent, and then they wanted to create more of a social hierarchy with that, where you had specialty teas were for the rich and the lower teas were for the working class.
Yes. The paupers could have these types of teas, but things like our Earl Grey that we're both drinking here, and these sort of blends that that were associated with the nobles of the time and the lords and ladies. It was an aristocratic take on something that was available to everybody, and we see that through today with all of those sorts of things. We all have. I got myself a new phone over this during this period. I was out of contract and decided to get a new one. And in my research, I found, the phone I had, which is a nice Samsung, one of the new Samsung phones, and it's a great phone. It's not the cheapest phone out there in the market, far from it. But I found that there is a I can't remember the fashion label, but there's a New York fashion label that has put their name to a design of that phone, and it triples the price. It's got their logo on the back, and it's their coloured ribbon that goes around the back of the case.
So it's the status symbol on it.
It is 100% is simply a status element of it, and it sort of, that's a common theme we see in society. There, you can see that I've got something that is better than you, therefore I'm a better person than you. And I deserve this.
Even if I don't really know how to use it, the point is I can have it and you can't.
Yep, exactly. And that seems to have been that common thread through most of that European sort of acquisition of this substance.
In tandem with sugar and coffee too.
Yes, absolutely. Not sort of in isolation. We want these resources, and we want them as that form of power and currency, so that we have that control and that sense of entitlement that seem to come out of nowhere. We're entitled to this because we are entitled to it with no justification.
Well, the sun rises and the sun sets on the empire, right? So
this is true.
It's all ours. And another quote I had was from a publicist who's involved in promoting tea, A.E. Duchesne. I don't know if that's how he pronounced it. If he was English, he might not have wanted it that way. 1914 said, "Tea has eliminated the drunken nurses and bibulous coachmen of Dickensian times, has eradicated the need for every businessman to clinch his bargain over a glass, and expelled the belief that drunkenness was the test and evidence of British manliness." So, as pompous as that all sounds, I feel there is a point, and we're not really quite aware of, with alcohol, people were drunk most of the time, just during the day, especially the men.
To various extents, yes. Slightly tipsy through to just blind drunk.
Yep.
But it was part of culture. It was part of daily life. It's one
again. I feel it's probably another thing again of showing off that you could be drunk and you could get all this alcohol. And as he mentions there, to clinch a deal, to have a good business agreement made, you had to celebrate it. So in some ways, tea did help in getting people to sober up and enjoy a drink that didn't disturb your faculties.
That pulled through and is still a common thread today. The idea of if you sight tested two groups of people and you put two scenarios in front of them, one, a group of 3 or 4 guys standing around in a bar, drinking pint after pint, getting drunker and drunker, and then put against that a group of 4 gentlemen wearing dinnerware and sitting around a smaller table drinking a cup of tea while chomping on a cucumber sandwich or something similar, and asked which one is more classy, which one is more desirable,
which one do you aspire to?
Yes. I mean, I'm sure you'd get a few people saying, "No, give me the beer every day," which is fine. But I would probably hazard a guess and make a broad sweeping assumption there that it would be the tea drinking. It's interesting when you look at that. There are certain teas out there, and if you look at some tea ads, specifically Yorkshire Tea, the Yorkshire Tea Company and the Yorkshire Tea, that is advertised as a manly tea. It's a very strong tea, and it is quite a strong tea, but it's a really strong tea for men. Got to only real men can handle their Yorkshire tea.
The strength tea.
And there's a series of ads with Sean Bean doing that as well, and
he doesn't die in them, right?
He doesn't, which is why you should watch them. It's the one thing he doesn't die. But they absolutely bring out this. You want to be a real man, then drink Yorkshire tea. And so absolutely echoes that quote.
And again, the workman's tea in some ways too, right? When you're having it with your lunch or whatever, and I don't disagree with that. As you said, as questionable as this statement is, there, it's absolutely it's got an element of truth to that of encouraging people to stop drinking one type of drink that has these negative social connotations to it, and moving towards a drink that is considered to be classier, more more respectable. With the pinky raised, right?
Absolutely. You can't,
as opposed to chugging it down.
You wouldn't dare lose a drip of tea when you're drinking that.
Well, and we'll talk about it in in a future episode, but this again is part of the thing I've gotten in with the book, where you have this again, with the tea being welcomed for the lower classes and manly tea, and drink this instead of drinking alcohol. And then later on, it'll switch to feminizing tea, and that you're effeminate if you drink tea. And it's a whole very interesting movement again ties into money and control again in most cases, but we'll get into it in future episodes. The last quote I had, which I really feel puts some perspective on this, is from a cultural theorist who's from Jamaica originally, named Stuart Hall, who says, "Where does it come from?" Meaning the tea. Sri Lanka, India, that is the outside history that is inside the history of the English. There is no English history without that other history. And that's something I feel is never taken into consideration. The idea that it's British tea, stamped with approval, British tea, and you're drinking it, and that none of it really ever came from Britain. It all came from elsewhere.
As I've said earlier, I've been astounded by the truth of this by going into doing some high level reading. I mean, even a quick jumping on Wikipedia, typing in tea and reading the first few paragraphs of the history was a complete eye opener for me to go, hang on, tea is traditionally Chinese. If you had asked me where is tea from,
right?
In Australia, it's Twinings or it's Dilmah, and we have the ads of the Dilmah tea on there, shot in the tea fields of the family picking tea and saying, we make you the highest quality teas. And absolutely, that's, if you had have asked me a month ago before we started looking into this and doing some research itself, I would be ashamed to realize that no, my understanding of that is completely and utterly warped. And it's been a huge eye-opener for me to realize that this is such a influenced history by, call it by the victors. The history is written by the victors and no less so in this instance. As you said, that British tea, British stamp of approval, if you try to say anything other than that to a native English person, I assume you'd probably get looked down upon. No, it's British tea, it's English tea. That's how we have tea.
And it seems the right time to be doing it, as we're discussing this now, with our social upheaval around the world against racism, against the nobility, the people at the top controlling so much, that we talk about this, that we understand it and educate ourselves as well as others.
Yes.
I think that's my really goal with this, and learning not just about tea, but the toll also on how many it's taken, and that we understand that when we drink tea, it's obviously a privilege.
Yes, it is absolutely a privilege that we can sit here talking about it, drinking what was considered an upper class tea blend derived off the backs of centuries of terrible events, ultimately, all leading back to a culture who discovered and grew and cultivated and made this amazing leaf-based drink that was and is fantastic.
And that it wanted everyone just to have and enjoy and to get healthier from it.
Yeah, ultimately, yes. And so I'll be interested to go into some of that future history around around the religious tie-ins and sort of understanding what the aim of that was, because it is, as you said, something that was meant to be for all, meant to be enjoyed and consumed by all, and ultimately greed and power is what changed all of that.
I also hope to learn a bit about how we get our tea now. Obviously, it's a lot of the same process, but how does it come from? How is it organized by the companies, by the families, by the people? I hope, I don't know, but I assume that it's at least better conditions than it was previously, and that the people are doing better. But I also want to know, again, how, with all this tea that I have available with the click of a button and the punching in of a credit card, I can get within a week or two,
What's the process for coming from farm to you, sort of aspect, and what are the conditions of those people who are farming that for you? It's I am nervous to think that I might be putting some of these Twinings bags and Twinings boxes into the bin. But I think we'll see what we discover over the coming weeks and months.
Yep, definitely. Do you have some tea anecdotes or memories? I've got some interesting ones. Well, personal ones that are. So, do you want to go first, or shall I give you mine?
I actually probably don't, outside of the one with my nana there. I was trying to think of a few others, but my research took me down the path of other areas that I focused through. So I came back to it and was coming up with blanks for a while. So I'll probably have to pass.
You wouldn't be able to compete with mine. Mine are interesting. So I have twice been scarred or baptized, if you will, by hot tea.
Oh, dear.
So the first time was when I was 9 months old, and I grabbed a mug and poured it all over myself. And so originally it was on my right arm, and the bad part of it was when we went to the hospital. I mean, this is all secondhand. I don't know personally, but this is what
you were 9 months. How do you remember?
When we went to the hospital, the also wise doctor said, "Oh, it's a burn, so you should wrap that up in a tight bandage and leave it for 2 weeks."
Ooh, so I have a friend who is a burns nurse, and she put up on Facebook this week, actually, so prominent that a picture of a toddler who had been burnt by hot tea, seeing that burning, it was sort of ouch.
Yeah.
And sort of seeing all the recommendations of put under cold water for 20 to 30 minutes and etc. So the polar opposite of what the doctor recommended there.
So because of that, all my life I've borne I don't know how clear it is to see, a scar on my arm, which goes from wrist to just above my elbow, because that was the length of my arm when I was 9 months old. Over the years, it's gotten more tanned and everything and hidden, but that's something I've worn. So I can't remember if that was Earl Grey or not, but on a level, tea has become part of my genetics, sunk into the skin. Another time,
if this was a superhero origin story, you would now be able to shoot tea out of your hand or something.
Yeah, the less glamorous other one incident was when I was just drinking tea, dropped it and poured it all over my crotch. Which also led to burns and a lot of pain. And my second baptism there with tea. But
and how old were you there? Don't say last week. It's sort of
no. I've got much more controlling about tea. Probably early teens. Yeah, I think like 13 or something. Yes.
Ouch.
It took some healing, but again, tea and I are one in some ways.
I can thankfully say that I've had no tea-based accidents myself. No, my burns are usually caused by the oven. Hence my slight phobia of ovens. Not tea
Wisely
related,
too. Ours, every time you open the oven, if you don't remember, you open it, and if you don't stand back, there's a gush of heat that shoots out right away.
Steam, you get the steam up on the glasses, and yes, it's a good
before it comes out.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we're coming on to our last segment of our thing, where we recommend our own teas that we like.
Okay.
Did you? Well, I'm going to go first because I ended up having three. Because I got one today that I enjoyed. A subscription tea service called Simple Loose Leaf Tea. So every month they send me 4 teas, so it would work out perfectly. I do 2 teas each episode. So you could choose actually different kind of groupings. I think there was a chai one, a green tea one. I chose the black tea. And so the first one I tried was the Simple Earl Grey. Kind of funny because they actually have a little picture of Sherlock Holmes on there. So the Simple Earl Grey is a classic Earl Grey black tea that uses a wonderful South Indian black tea. When first opening this tea, you'll smell the telltale citrus bergamot, but smell a second time and you'll catch the scent of rich orange zest that is a little sweeter than other bergamots. I really did enjoy this. I mean, I enjoy most Earl Greys. I think what's usually called French Earl Grey, I don't know if it's the level of bergamot or what, to be a little too what I would call perfumey, I think. So that one I don't like as much. This was kind of like that, but with the citrus orange zest bit, it like cut into it enough that made me enjoy it much more.
Okay.
So that's what I was really happy with that, and that's coming to me later this week in a larger amount.
Ah, that's usually a pretty good recommendation if you've tried the sample and now you're doing a larger order. So that's a great. For me, I don't have the bag with me because unfortunately I've used it up and I've thrown it out. Unfortunately,
that's a good reason, though, as opposed to throwing it out with it full.
Yeah, absolutely. As I was saying to you earlier, I'm a little disappointed with one of the orders that I've placed in that they were out of stock after I ordered. So, but this isn't that company. It's a masala chai from a local WA, West Australian-based coffee company. So they're a Yahava coffee, but they do a range of teas as well. I've got a chamomile of theirs. It's quite nice. But for this, I've decided to recommend their masala chai. I've actually got a video of me sampling it, that video that I sent through to you. So I'll put it up.
We'll put it up on YouTube and link it,
Yeah. A little bit of just a really quick sort of history, I guess, of chai. It was sort of an early 20th century adaptation in India that the Indian Tea Association was initially against. They didn't like the idea of spices and herbs being added to a traditional Assam tea because it reduced the ratio of the tea leaf per cup and thus reduced consumption and profits. Again, back to our greed factor. However, it sort of became a staple of Indian tea consumption and a popular alternative to the just traditional black. But to be called a masala chai, it has to have water, tea leaves, so the Assam tea, milk, sugar, and ginger. They're your 5 bases to it. And then the additional spices are called again, excuse my pronunciation, but a kaha. And that includes various quantities and ratios depending on the maker or drinker's preferences.
Right.
And they can include a base of ground ginger, cardamom pod, and then the addition of things like cinnamon, star anise, fennel, peppercorns, nutmeg, cloves, cardamom seed, ginger root, honey, and vanilla, and sort of different ratios of all of that.
Yeah.
You then get some extra variations of that, and in this current era of pre-mixed variations, you can pretty much go to any company and say, hey, what types of chai do you have? So masala chai, to make it, and I've never made it like this. So the next time I've got some chai on order that didn't come. So unfortunately I have to reorder some, but I am going to make it like this. So you have your pot and you simmer milk. And I don't have the exact quantities. There's a pretty good one on, I think it is Wikipedia, but there's a few companies around there that sort of give you the ratios and amounts. But you simmer some milk and water with your tea, the sweeteners, so your honey or your sugar. Then you go and add in your ginger. Let that simmer for a few minutes. Then towards the end, you include the kaha, the spice blend. Give that a few more minutes to bubble through and let the spices come through. Then you pour that through a strainer into the teapot. So you're effectively cooking this tea as opposed to letting it steep.
Boiling it like a soup or a stew.
Yeah.
Sounds delicious.
And I guess what I've been doing more recently in my personal move away from caffeine, and that's sort of been a thing that I've been doing from a sleep side of things. I've been struggling to sleep recently, so I've been moving away from caffeine to try to minimize that and try to root out what is the cause of my sleeplessness. So I've been moving away from putting tea in there to a tisane, so using a rooibos, or as an Australian, I want to pronounce it as yerba mate.
Yes,
because that's how it's written.
Yes.
So apologies there, but using those instead of a traditional tea, gets
the reason
rid of,
there's an accent on the E, I believe. There.
Yeah, there is. But every time I see it, it's sort of the Australianism comes out in me, and it's yerba mate. But you still get the chai spice coming through that. So absolutely, the Yahava masala chai is it's a black Assam tea. Really tasty, a little bit of honey, and they do suggest steeping that in milk, so you get that same sort of creamy taste and texture through it. So definitely a recommendation from me.
With your little history lesson, this explains a lot more with my final tea I'll be recommending, because now I understand it a lot better. Good. So the next one I had that I originally was going to do, but not really caring about as much now because I didn't like it that much, is Kenilworth Ceylon, a Ceylon black tea from the Kenilworth estate in the northern region of Dimbula, Sri Lanka. Is known for using a large leaf and full oxidation. I think this was just another kind of generic black tea, but I found it very bland. I tried to make it regular at first, then extra strong the next time. And even over, common blends like Tetley or any of those are the ones, Yorkshire. It didn't have anything going for it. It was just very boring, I felt. So that's my negative one on that one. So I won't be ordering that.
Fair enough. I guess, it might be a good base for something else to add.
True, yeah.
If you want a little bit of the tea taste in a herbal blend, something like that, it might help to not mask the herbal blend that you're adding.
I wanted to, if maybe possibly with milk. I don't do milk in my tea, so maybe, or even just because I do sugar, maybe with honey or something, you might get different notes coming out and things like that. What's your next?
My next one is not a tea. Apologies, it's a tisane. So I'm going to be a stickler for that. I'll call out when it's a tisane versus a tea to make sure it's consistent. But so this is a tisane by a company called Rugenic. Rue from kangaroo, but they're a Australian.
But they're not
organic...
a genetics company, right? Genetics.
No, it does sound like it.
They've taken kangaroo DNA and tea
and melted it. Thankfully not.
To give a jump in your drink.
I think it's meant to be kangaroo organic, so Rugenic. Should be Ruganic, I guess, but Rugenic, it's an Australian company, and they do harvest everything locally, is my understanding. Not necessarily locally WA, but locally within Australia. And they try to use locally grown variants on things wherever possible. So it's a blend called Native Relief. So again, one of those drinks that I've been trying from a sleep side of things. It's designed to provide a general feeling of well-being and aid in general ailments, as is all tea, I guess. Its ingredients and the claim to fame for Rugenic is it's completely organic, and it includes a blend of lemon myrtle, which is an Australian native bush plant with a lemon scent and taste to it. It's high in antioxidants, and it's got some anti-inflammatory properties as well. It has native lemongrass, non-native lemongrass. So I don't know where that's pulled in from, but I figure if you've got native lemongrass, why would you bother grabbing non-native as well?
Maybe the warehouse has a mixture of different things and some got contaminated.
And it does have rose petals in it as well, which I'll be honest, I was using this as my daily drink. If I'm in the mood for a quick cup, what will I make? And I turn to this, which I'm kicking myself for because I finished the jar. And I'm in sort of 200-gram jars. And after I finished it, I realized that the brewing suggestions say you can brew those leaves 3 times.
Oh!
So I have effectively wasted 2/3 of this jar of tea. I have another sleepy sort of base blend.
You're proving yourself as a tea snob here, you really.
I am. I've got a nighttime sleep blend, so I've made sure that the last few nights since I've read that, I've been making sure I definitely reuse those leaves, so that I don't waste it. But
maybe you were thinking you were just using the local lemongrass and not the non-local.
But no, it's really tasty. The lemon isn't particularly overpowering. It smells quite strong, but when you're drinking it, it's not particularly overpowering. And the rose comes through really nicely in the background.
There's something I think it'll be in the next episode tea recommendation. One of the ones I got in the sample thing, I think again has rose petals in it, or rose, and it's a very nice little subtle end note that just really rounds things out.
It does. Yes, but no, that's very good. And again, I think they do ship internationally as well. They ship in glass jars, which is lovely to serve them in. But you can do it in bags as well. So if you're gonna order it, and not buy it in person, shipping too. It's a lot lighter and it's a lot less breakable. Because having glass broken through your tea, it's not a great feel. It doesn't go down that well.
Acquired taste. Yeah, you definitely want to put that through a strain.
Or two.
Yeah, the slivers. Okay, so the last tea, originally I didn't have this, but it arrived today, which my wife had found and ordered, mainly because they are an American company, little American company, run by African Americans specifically. So that's why we're also, with everything going on, wanting to support Black people where we could. So she got this. I'm just going to read a little bit off the website here about how they're called Bunka, Bunka. Bunka is about fine tradition, culture, socialization, gatherings, and ceremonies. Our products are here to give the world a taste of Eastern Africa in gatherings, restaurants, tea shops, or events, wherever people meet to talk, socialize. Bunka is there. In 2017, the Bunker brand was born to capture traditional East African influence and share with our broader communities. Our hope is that our ingredients, processes, and work ethic combined with our joy to innovate will win you over. She ordered the one tea, which is called Galab tea.
Oh,
Have you heard of it?
I've literally just jumped on their website while you've been speaking, and it's on their main website under products.
Mm-hmm. They only have one tea, which is this one. And this is the one we got today, which I tried earlier. And after all your talk about chai, I mean, let me find the specifics here. I mean, the ingredients here are Kenyan tea, ginger, cardamom, and cinnamon.
Oh,
and just even when we opened the bag and just smelling it, we're like, oh, this is amazing. So I made a cup earlier, and I didn't do it. I should, next time I'll start doing it with the milk and like the chai way you're supposed to do it. But I just did a basic cup or whatever, but just on its own with some sugar. It was wonderful. I've tried some, and even though it was not loose leaf, it's tea bags, but still was really good. I've tried other chais where they're fine, but there's always a kind of like almost slight artificial flavor to them because they're a processed tea or whatever. Whereas this just felt the real McCoy, you know, the real thing. And it was very reasonable for, it was 30 bags for $8, I think it was. And then if you do two, you get free shipping. Yeah. So we'll definitely be supporting them. It was very nice.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing. I wonder if I'll have to continue clicking through the website to see if they ship all the way to Australia. Because that sounds
pretty sure they do. And again, this wasn't, we didn't realize this too afterwards too, but they're based out of Minneapolis.
Oh, wow.
Where George Floyd was murdered. So brings it all around in perspective.
Yeah.
Let's see. Economy, shipping. I think they probably do. If not, I can send you some.
I was going to say, I have a connection in the USPS that
And since our other host, Mike, who hopes to be on the next episode, has sent me so much tea, with one hopefully coming in the next few days, we can definitely help each other. But we'll include links for everything in the notes. I don't know how long we've been going on for. Well, actually, I can look here. An hour, over an hour. Okay.
Yeah. So the 15 to 20 minutes that we're hoping for.
I was estimating 15 to 20 minutes, so we'll see. Well, we'll cut some of this out. But anyway, we hope any listeners that are still listening have enjoyed this beginning first run of a ride through the land of tea and its history and present and future. I've definitely enjoyed chatting and hearing what you have to bring and say, and
that's been fantastic.
Ideas. Our discourse has been enjoyable. It has been enjoyable. I think this will be the start of something really great.
I think so. And as I said at the start, thank you for having us. And to be honest, thank you for suggesting the idea. A few months ago when you did.
I mean, I think we just started talking about tea one day on Discord, didn't we? And then all of a sudden I realized we're all big tea drinkers.
Yeah, we're having a bit of a catch-up chat. And I'll be honest, I hadn't had a cup of tea myself before then regularly. For a long time, I'd turned to coffee and been doing a lot of that. And I found that, just that chat got me back into having some teas and really appreciating them much more than I had done in the past outside of a casual tea drinker. And it's definitely become a lot more interesting reading through the history, understanding the cultural impact and where all this has come from has been, as I said, a huge eye-opener for me and very much been a topic that has gained interest for me in a huge way. Yeah.
Right. Thank you for listening and catch us on our next episode.
See you later and thanks again. Thank you for listening to While There Is Tea, There Is Hope. This episode featured myself, Tarran Merlo, and Alex C. Telander. It was produced by Tarran Merlo. Details of the music featured in this episode can be found in the show notes. You can find out more about this show at our growing website, www.t-cast.com. And we hope you can join us for our next episode, which will be out on the 1st of March. Thank you for listening, and have a tea-rific time.